Okay, that feels better, doesn't it? So I'm Gavin Lindberg, and I'm here with my wife, Wendy. In the back, Wendy, stand up. Wendy and I live in Germantown, Maryland, just up the road here. And I want to start by thanking the IOM for this important meeting, and important workshop, and thank our colleagues at the American Cancer Society, particularly Rebecca. How about a round of applause for Rebecca? So Wendy and I are really honored to be here, and particularly honored to be on a panel with our good friends Vicki and Peter Brown, who have been such leaders on these important issues from a parent perspective. You know, frankly, I'd rather be anywhere else but here today, and you're going to learn a little bit about why that is. But there's so many pieces to the conversation that we're having, so many moving parts to quality palliative care and hospice care. And what I want to do, hopefully, is put a human face on one critical area, and that is the need to improve terminal end-of-life care for children at home. I only have one slide, and that's my slide. And I only have one because it's impossible to improve upon this slide. So this is our son, Evan. Evan was our only child. And back in 2006, when he was just 3 years old, he was diagnosed with stage 4 NMIC amplified neuroblastoma just up the road at Children's National Medical Center. And for 4 years, Evan fought with incredible courage and grace at Children's National, at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, and at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And I must say, he received outstanding care at all 3 institutions, just outstanding care. It's unbelievable what kids like Evan go through. It's just unbelievable. And he was fortunate to be cared for by 3 of the best institutions in the world. And, you know, we have a soft spot in our heart for Children's National, our home institution, and where he was diagnosed and cared for so many days and nights. We've got some of his nurses back here who cared for Evan. Thank you very much. And there was not one day in those 4 years, not one day, that Evan wasn't either going through treatment or recovering from treatment. And it was just absolutely brutal. And our son endured it with a courage and a grace that is just undescribable, incomprehensible. And Evan was and always will be our hero. So fast forward to October 22nd, 2010, and we lost our beautiful boy. We lost him at home, and he was 7 years old. And it pains me to say that the care that he received while he was at home in his final days was nowhere near the quality of care that he received while he was getting treatment. In fact, I'll go as far to say that the care that he received was a disservice to him and the strength and the courage that he displayed every day for 4 years. And simply put, the hospice system failed our son. And as a result, we feel like we failed our son. And those thoughts stay with you, and on your worst days, they haunt you. So let me say that when we were entering the final days with Evan, it was a collective decision by Wendy and myself and all of the physicians who cared for our son at those 3 great institutions that the best place for Evan to be was at home. And I remember all too well that conversation that I had with his end-of-life physician at Children's National the first time that we spoke. I said, our sole priority here is to make sure that Evan does not suffer and is not in pain and is as comfortable as possible. And she said she understood and agreed, and agreed that it was best that Evan spend his final days at home. Now, it's important to point out that the pediatric oncologist at Children's who cared for our son when he was in treatment was not the pediatric oncologist who cared for Evan when he was at home. In fact, the end-of-life physician that Evan had through Children's National never met my son, never met him before he went home, never met him while he was at home, and never spoke to him while he was at home. Let me repeat that. The person who cared for my son at home when he needed it the most never met him and never spoke to him. And in addition, the wonderful oncology nurses at Children's National never had an opportunity to care for our son while he was at home. Instead, we had nurses who were adult care-centered nurses who came to see us from an adult hospital in Montgomery County, Maryland. Their experience and expertise was in caring for adults, and we found them caring for our son. So we ended up in this highly dysfunctional triangle, if you will. Evan at the top with his devastated mother and father, and then down below at one angle, a physician who never met my son and was never able to travel to our home to properly care for our son. And on the other end of the triangle, nurses who were from another hospital that was not Children's National, who were adult nurses, and whose experience, expertise, and later we learned comfort level was in caring for adults, not children. So how can this be acceptable? Well, the answer is it's not acceptable. And the experience that we had because of it was, quite frankly, awful. I won't go into all of the details about why it was awful, but I think I have to share a few details so people have an understanding. Number one, unacceptable discomfort, distress, and anxiety. Number two, refusal to administer IV pain meds to my son. So here's my 7-year-old boy with terminal neuroblastoma that's metastasized to the brain who could not receive IV morphine or other pain meds at home. 3 years later, at an event actually not dissimilar to this, we learned from one of those nurses, by me overhearing a conversation she was having with someone else, that the reason Evan didn't get those IV pain meds is because she was, quote, uncomfortable providing them to a child at home. Number three, Evan had respiratory challenges that were not appropriately anticipated or cared for. Number four, a phone conversation with his end-of-life physician as things were starting to take a turn for the worst, saying that we should expect Evan to continue to be with us for another week or two. He died the next morning. And he died the next morning after a horrific night and morning that my wife and I will forever have seared in our memory. And then finally, one of the nurses coming over to the house after he had passed to call Evan's time of death. And that nurse was more interested, quite frankly, in collecting and accounting for the oral pain meds that we had in the house than comforting Evan's family, or even sticking around to wait until the funeral home arrived. So these are the images and memories that, frankly, are never going to leave my wife and I. It's the reason we're here today. We're here to speak for Evan and so many others like him. And unfortunately, there's a lot of kids like Evan. There's a lot of kids like Evan. That is just simply unacceptable in this country. The fact is, home was the right place for my son to pass. Everyone agreed. What was wrong was the type of care he received. And I'm convinced, after speaking with parents who fortunately had the right care at home, that Evan could have had that experience, but he didn't. And of course, as a parent, when you go into these things, you don't know anything, and you're putting your trust and your faith in the providers and in the system. And that was a mistake on our part. There was a lack of communication, there was a lack of transparency about what was happening and why. And children with cancer fight too hard every single day to be left with a fate like that. And if we can't get this right, then shame on us. Shame on us. You know, as a parent, I think about this issue, and it boils down to, like so many other things in life, leadership. It boils down to leadership. And quite frankly, I get the importance of many things that have been said here today, but I really don't want to hear about challenges with reimbursement. And I don't want to hear about licensing challenges where a physician and a nurse can't go from one jurisdiction to another. And I don't want to hear about funding issues, because we can fix licensing issues, and we can fix funding issues, and we can fix everything that is wrong with the system that makes that little boy have his final days play out the way that they did. So Wendy and I, through our foundation, the Evan Foundation, have committed to try to make a difference in solving these challenges. Every chance we get, we tell Evan's story. We documented Evan's story in writing not long after he passed. One of the things that we have done is speak to medical students and residents at Children's National, sharing with them the experience that we had. And our message is simple, and that is every terminal child in the home care setting should have the right to be cared for by doctors and nurses who have the experience and expertise in all key facets of pediatric hospice care to make these kids comfortable. It seems very simple, and I think it's eminently doable. So let me close there. Thank everybody, and look forward to the panel discussion.